This is Bessy, working as an assistant professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering in Mallareddy Engineering College for Women. Today I am going to discuss about looping statements in Python. So looping statements are otherwise called as iterative statements or repetitive statements. So whenever we have a certain set of statements or an action to be performed repeatedly for n number of times, it is not feasible to write that n number of statements that many times in the program. So we consider the use of looping statements in Python programming language. Here in Python we have two types of looping statements. First one is for statement or for loop, and second one is while loop. So first let us discuss about for statement in Python. Okay, for statement in Python, the syntax in which we have to use the for loop is, firstly we have to mention the keyword for, then we have to mention a variable that is called as the iteration variable. Here the iteration variable name which we have given is val. In is nothing but a membership operator which will check whether val is there in this sequence or not. So in is a type of operator which is called as membership operator. And sequence can be anything like list, tuple, dictionary or set or anything like that. The name of the sequence must be mentioned in this place, and after that we have to put a colon, just like how we put in at the end of an if condition. And leaving 4 spaces or the proper indentation is a must in Python. So after leaving a proper indentation, we have to mention the lines or the body of the for loop. Body of the for loop is nothing but set of statements which will perform the task n number of times. N number of times will be calculated from the size of the sequence. Okay. So this is the flowchart which explains a for loop. Here we have a diamond shape. This is nothing but making decision. So last item reached or not. So firstly, the condition will be checked, and if the condition is true, then the body of the for loop will be executed. If it is false, then we will come out of the for loop. So this will continue as long as the number of elements in the sequence, like till the end of the sequence, okay, till the length of the sequence. So here this is the syntax of for loop. Now let me explain with an example for the for loop. Here we can see in this program, we can see a list. Okay, list is named as my underscore list, which is equal to, it contains 5 elements, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Okay, now we are opening a for loop with the keyword for, and the iteration variable which we have used is value. In is the membership operator, from which sequence we have to take the iteration variable, like the values my underscore list, which is the list which is already defined. Okay, so from this, inside this for loop, we are giving a statement, say print value. So this value comes from the sequence, and the first value that comes into this for loop is 1. Then in the next iteration, the second value will be 2. In the next iteration, the third value will be 3. It goes on till 5. Okay, so this for loop will execute how many times? 5 times. Now after executing 5 times, there are no more elements in the sequence to be executed. So once the condition becomes false, or once we have reached the end of the sequence, we will come out of the for loop, where we have one more statement to be executed, that is print job is done. So look at the output. Here for the first iteration, your output will be 1, which is the first value in the sequence. Second iteration, your value will be 2, which is the second value in the sequence. Third iteration 3, fourth iteration 4, and fifth iteration your value will be 5, which is the last value in the sequence. Now the last value is over, so we will come out of the for loop, and there we have a statement to print. The statement to be printed is printed as it is on the output, because it is given inside the print statement. Job is done. So this is one example which explains for loop. Let us see one more example to explain for loop. To find the sum of numbers in a list using for loop. So in the previous example, we just displayed the elements of a list using for loop. Now we are going to find out the sum of all the elements in the list using for loop. So here again we have declared, we have used a list numbers is equal to, list elements will always be put inside square brackets separated by commas like this. So here we have this many elements inside the list. So before finding the sum inside the for loop, we are supposed to initialize it to 0. So sum is equal to 0. Now open a for loop. As I said already, the keyword is for, the iteration variable is val, membership operator is in, and the name of the sequence is numbers. Okay, and then put a colon. So inside the for loop, we need to find out the sum. So for each iteration, in the first iteration we will be fetching 6. So to 0 we will add 6. And in sum we have 6 now. Now in the second iteration we will be fetching 5. So earlier we have 6. 6 plus 5 becomes 11. So now in sum we have 11. Now in the third iteration we have 3. So 11 plus 3, it becomes 14. It goes on till we reach the last element of the list. And finally outside the for loop we have the final sum in the variable called sum. So using a print statement, we can print the final sum onto the output screen. So this is the second example which will explain for loop. So the one that we have seen now, the syntax for loop which we have seen now, is using any sequence. Sequence can be a list, a tuple, a dictionary, or a set, anything. But now there is another condition where we don't have a particular sequence, but we can have any number between a given range, like from 1 to 10 or from 1 to 100. So in that case we have a built-in function called range. So this range function will enable you to select a number between a particular range, that is from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100, whatever is specified. The syntax for the range function is always, first argument should be start, second argument should be stop, and the third argument should be step size. Starting value that we give will be considered for the selection. Stop value will not be included in the selection. And whereas the step size is optional, if we did not mention the step size, by default it will be considered as 1. So we can see some examples to support this concept. Print range of 10. Range of 10, the interpreter will understand as 0, 10. So 0 is a start and 10 is stop. Step size is not mentioned, so by default it will be 1. So range of 10, it will be displayed as range of 0, 10. Now look at the second example. Print list of range of 10. So we want the range of 10 in the form of list to be displayed onto the output screen. So this is the output. The first value will be 0 because 10 represents 0, 10, where 0 will be included in the selection, but 10 will not be included in the selection. So that means 0 to 9 will be the range of numbers. So 0 is there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10 is not included in the selection. Now look at the next example where we have a list of, where we want to print the list of range of 2, 8. As I told you before from the syntax, 2 is a starting position, starting value, 8 is a stop value, and step value is not mentioned, so that means it is 1. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 is not included in the selection. This is the range of numbers which we are going to consider with this particular range function. Now look at the next one. List of range of 2, 20, 3. Here we have mentioned the step size as 3. So every third element will be considered in the selection starting from 2, but the last one 20 will not be included in the selection. So the numbers will be 2, 5, 8, 11, 14, 17. So these are some examples which will help you understand what is a range function. And next we are going to see about how we can use that range function inside a for loop. So here we have an example, gender equal to 3 elements are there in that particular list. For I in range of, what is the number we are giving for the range? The length of this particular list. So what the length of that list is 3, where the indexes will start from 0, 1 and 2. Now inside the for loop we actually want to print I like and each value of this particular list. So I like, in the first iteration, I like first element is pop, so I like pop. In the second iteration it becomes I like rock, and in the third iteration it becomes I like jazz. So this one is a for loop which is done using range function. Next, let us see about nested for loops. So nested for loops, the word nested explains that there is an inner structure as well as an outer structure. So here we have for loops. Here we have an inner for loop and an outer for loop. So let us see this program which explains a nested loop. Firstly, we have defined two lists. One is the adjective list and the other one is the fruits list. Okay. Now the first for loop, that is the outer for loop, we are writing it for the adjective list. So for that we should have an iteration variable called x for x in adjective list. So adj. So inside this for loop we need to leave a space for the indentation. And the inner for loop should be mentioned with another iteration variable for y in fruits. Now inside this for loop, that is inside the inner for loop, print x comma y. X will come from the first list and y will come from the second list. So in the first iteration the value will be red apple, in the second iteration value will be red banana, in the third iteration value will be red cherry. Okay, and the next iteration of x the value will become big apple, in the next iteration big banana, in the next iteration big cherry. Okay, this continues, and the inner loop will execute completely once for each iteration of the outer loop. So now let us see how to use an else statement with a for loop. So here else statement is completely optional, whereas in if condition or in if condition we have to use an else statement. Either the if part or the else part will be executed. But it is not like that in for loop. Once the complete for loop is executed, after that the else part, if it is mentioned, that also will be executed to show that the for loop has completed its execution. So here we have this program for x in range 6. We need to print the values till 6. So 6 will not be included in the selection. So 0 to 5 will be executed. Finally, after execution of 5, then we come to the else part where we have print finally finished. That also will be executed. So else part is compulsory executed in